folks. When I was 20 years old, the most embarrassing thing in the world to me was the fact that I was still a virgin. And I don't know why this was the most embarrassing thing, because if I was 20, this was 1998, so that was a time that I was wearing glitter as blush and a clip-on nose ring, so I had other stuff to be embarrassed about. And when I say virgin, by the way, I don't just mean that I'd never had anyone else's genitals in, on, or near me. I mean nothing. Like, I had never been on any dates. I had never been to any bases. The only time that my mouth had ever been on someone else's mouth was in rehearsals and then performances of a high school production of Oliver. So, more musicals! So, the cabin was sealed. And even worse than that, I thought, was the fact that I felt like everybody knew it. You know, like I just felt like I reeked of inexperience and that I was just oozing virgin juice just all over the place, and I could not wipe it off me no matter what I did. And this was the most mortifying thing in the world. And looking back, that's really funny to me that that was the most mortifying thing. Oh, I can't wipe off virgin juice. You know, because like it was not going to be long before I would become even more embarrassed about who I ultimately let do the wiping. So, now, the summer between my sophomore and junior year in college, I was working at a pizzeria Uno in Philadelphia. Just so you know the starting off point of this story. And I had finally gotten to the point in this job where I was like familiar with where everything was and with the menu, and that I was gonna get bored if I didn't just start dicking around and getting involved in drama. And there was no one better to dick around with than my best work friend at the time, which was this guy, Matt, and we were always together, and we were always making fun of people and yip-yapping. And so one night, it was a very slow Tuesday night, and Matt and I went into the upstairs, like the empty dining room that they had upstairs, and we were just rolling silverware and napkins and talking, and suddenly he blurts out, "Oh my God, I forgot to tell you. So apparently, TJ likes you." TJ was one of the line cooks in the kitchen, and at 23, he was big and broad-shouldered with the shaved head and the bicep barbed wire tattoo and the most symmetrical face I had ever seen. And he was really quiet, but I could still tell that there was something so Stella about him, which was so hot to me. And so for the last month, I had been hanging around him, you know, loitering in his station in the kitchen and hanging out after work, even going so far as to start listening to the music that he would wear, the bands on his t-shirt, you know, because I thought that if I listened to the music that he liked, even when he wasn't around, I was still getting to be close to him. Like I could just make him appear whenever I put on Metallica, and it would, you know, just make my thoughts of him that much more vivid and present. And so I would listen to the Black Album, specifically, you know, Enter Sandman, because of this driving, pounding intro that just keeps building and building and sounding like it's heading somewhere big, I just don't know where. That sounded like sex to me. And so, of course, I wanted to pair the two, TJ and that, so I would listen a lot. Now, Matt is now telling me that apparently, I guess, all of that worked, right? Because, you know, he's saying very confidently, TJ likes you, and when he says it, my stomach flip-flops, and I feel a tingling shoot through my body and fire out my extremities, and my throat starts that slow, crackling burn, you know, but before I can enjoy any of these feelings or this moment, Matt follows that up with, "But you know about TJ, right?" And I was like, "Oh, that he only has a high school education? Yeah, that's fine." And he was like, "No, well, yeah, but the other thing." No, I didn't know about another thing, and so I was like, "Well, what other thing?" And he says, "He's a skinhead." I'm sure I am not the only person in the history of the world to find out that someone I knew or I thought I knew was a skinhead. So I am also sure I am not the only person who then asked, "Just because his head is shaved?" And Matt was like, "No, the bad thing, the other thing, the neo-Nazi thing. And you know he's been in jail too, right?" I'm like, "Oh my God, no!" I was like, why do you know this?" And he's like, "Because I smoke with him outside." And it's like, he just tells me a lot of stuff. He has got a lot of opinions about blacks and gays and Jews, and he tells them all to me, you know? Like, smokers share with each other. That's how I know he likes you. Okay. Like, I knew in my heart of hearts that I should just stop liking TJ right then and there. Like, I could not like a proud and practicing racist. Like, what was that going to say about me? But on the other very unfortunate hand, I hadn't seen much evidence up until this point that I could do any better. It's like people weren't breaking down my door. I was rocketing toward adulthood without ever having been intimate with anyone in any way ever. And now I had it on good authority that someone had noticed me, maybe even enough to like do naked stuff with me. So this was a hard one, and I had no idea what I was gonna do until 3 nights later, after a party, under an outdoor air conditioning unit at the corner of 17th and Bainbridge in Philadelphia, I had my first real official kiss with a complete, total, out-and-out skinhead. A kiss, by the way, that was simultaneously coupled with my first real dry fingering, which is what I'm choosing to call it when someone rubs their hand over your pants still, but on your Mexico. And that's just what we did, like for hours that night. It was just like making out in Mexico, rubbing, and just all over Center City, Philadelphia, you know, that night, and then in my apartment the next night, and then the next night, and the next night, and the next night, until eventually it's official. We are dating. I am being intimate and in a relationship with a skinhead. And you know, I would not, maybe I'm generalizing, but I would never have thought that this was something that a musical theater major, you know, with parents who loved her and the most obsessive collection of Streisand the world had ever seen would do. But here she was doing it. And it wasn't just that he was a skinhead either. He was actually kind of a violent one. He used to love showing me all the bruises he had, just black ones all over his body that he would get starting fist fights in the parking lot at Megadeth shows. You know, just because he didn't like how somebody looked at him, so... And, you know, but for all, like, he would show off about that and everything Matt was telling me about what he thought about anyone not straight and white, I would never know it if I just went on how he was with me during those make-out, you know, dry hump sessions, which, by the way, were only ever make-out dry hump sessions up to this point, you know, because he was so sensitive and attentive and, you know, and not anything at all like this other character I was being made to believe also existed. So sensitive that one night, you know, we're just like dry humping, and after very politely asking me if we could not dry hump while the Golden Girls played in the background. Also an amazing sex soundtrack, by the way. He just kind of like stops at one point and he looks at me and he says, "Are you a virgin?" And I was like, "No!" You know, and then I was just like, "Oh God, no, he knows already." And I was like backpedaling, and I said, "Well, I guess technically, you know, I haven't had like actual, you know, sex, but, but, you know, and this is like so embarrassing, but when I was in high school, I was actually known as like the main blowjob person. That's just what I did all the time, just blowjobs, like so many. Too many to count, am I right? Like, you know, I didn't even want to tell somebody who could clearly already tell how green I was. You know, and he just kind of smiled and stifled a little giggle because I guess to him that was adorable. But even just that small little gesture, the smile and the giggle, was so sweet and gentle, you know, and polite that he's not calling me out on what he must have known was complete crap. And it made me feel safe. Oddly, like maybe even safe enough to just go back and be like, "No, that's not true either. You're already my first in more ways than one." Nope, I just blew him right there. You know, just went right down, like, you know, only, and trying to remember what I'd only read about how to give the proper blowjob. Open my throat, spitty, no teeth, hum. And this is how it was. Okay? Like, I would only ever want to be seen with him either in the restaurant or in my apartment when it was just the two of him. And then we would be in my apartment, we would make out, it would get really heavy, he would want to have sex, and I would head him off at the pass with a Hummer. Because I could not escape the thought that I really did not want my first official time to be with a skinhead, because that would be my story then for the rest of my life, and I really didn't want that. But I also knew that the longer that I stayed with him, the more that was becoming a very real possibility. And I knew I couldn't just like keep throwing up the BJ shield, but I also also knew that, like, I couldn't muster up the courage to break up with, like, the first person to ever show an interest in me. And so I took a third tactic, which was to try and prove he's not really a neo-Nazi and that he's just being a big silly. So I started to test him. So one afternoon, we're laying around, I'm just kind of stroking his back absently, and I say, TJ, you know I'm not really white, right? And he, like, stiffens and turns around and he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I mean, I'm 100% second generation Italian, so I guess I'm technically Mediterranean. And actually, I'm all Southern Italian, so I guess if you go, like, way back, my ancestors were, I guess, likely from North Africa. And he's still and stiff and, you know, not saying anything and just looking at me. And for a second, I actually think maybe he's confused. Like, okay, why are you telling me this? And then I could be like, yeah, gotcha, see, you don't really care about that stuff. But then he said, don't say that to me. You know I don't like that. You are white. End of discussion. And so, after another month of me continuing to lob clumsy tests at him like that. Like, oh, TJ, tonight when the busboy made that joke about the restaurant and the lady and Super Pussy, you laughed, and the busboy's black, so if you think black people are funny, then you can't really hate them. Like, after a month of, like, things like that, he now fires back at me with a test of his own. And he sits me down the one day, and he's, like, out of breath, he's so excited, and he says, you know what I think we should do? I think that you and me, I think we should, like, sell all of our stuff and buy a motorcycle and some weed and, like, just move to Missoula, Montana. And I was like, why Missoula, Montana? And he was like, because it's far and pretty. Those were his only reasons. And then he said, I mean, you know, you probably couldn't do your acting out there. I mean, I guess the closest thing would be, like, Vegas. In case that my rendition of TJ just there was not, you know, great, he was totally serious. Not just that he thought that Vegas is where an actor goes to grow and flourish, but that he thought Vegas was within commuting distance of Missoula, Montana. And so then he just said, you know, like, so I'll give you a week to decide, you know, because I gotta take care of some stuff on my end too. But I think you should know that I think that anyone who really loved her boyfriend would do it. Oh. Yeah. Oh. So a week ran out on that ultimatum, and I went into work on a day that I was off and he was working, and then we went up to that empty dining room upstairs, remember? And we sit down, and I had no idea what I was going to say, and I was relieved then, of course, when he spoke first, and he said, I think we should break up. Which should have been a huge relief to me, you know, because I didn't have to do it, whatever. But because I had never dated anybody before, I had also never been broken up with before. So just that instinct kicked in where you feel like now you have to defend yourself and save yourself. And I got ready to just, you know, plead with him and beg with him and say we can make it work. When he continued and he said, I just can't do this. I know I'm not the guy for you. You know, it's like you're probably, you know, you'll graduate school and move to New York and date some artsy guy, or you should. I don't think I can stop you from doing what you should do. And then he stood up, and he made like he was going to hug me, but then thought better of it and went back down to the kitchen. And that was it. It was over. And to this day, whenever I go to Philly, I take the train down, you know, which goes to New Jersey and then through the northeast, you know, part of Philly and then into Philly. And one of the towns that the train stops at is Bridesburg, which is where TJ lived. And so every time that train makes that stop in Bridesburg, I think about TJ. And as this little ritual I have, I guess, wherever my iPod is on whatever playlist, I put it on Enter Sandman, I guess, to just make the memory more vivid and colorful again. And I really have wondered on a bunch of occasions if I would actually still be with him if he had not liked me enough for the both of us. And, you know, we really, you know, in the big picture, like, he was only around for a couple of months, and we never did have actual sex. It was the everything but, and we never had actual sex. Because remember, I didn't want that mark on me, except that mark is on me. My first was a neo-Nazi skinhead, ignorant and angry with the rest of the world, but then gentle and selfless and wise with me, never forcing me to do anything I didn't want to do, and always assuring me that if we ever did have sex, that if I was ever ready to give that part of my virginity over to him, it would be okay. Because he was clean, he told me. Because they test for syphilis in jail. Thank you.